But first, let's talk about the Iran war and how the stakes now are focused on Lebanon. Remember, the 14-day ceasefire between America and Iran has entered its 8th day today. Both sides are trying to find a diplomatic way out, but bombs, missiles and rockets continue to fly on Lebanon front. And now peace in Iran hinges on the end of violence in Lebanon. Iran has insisted that any peace deal without the US must include Lebanon, where Hezbollah intensified attacks against Israel in retaliation to the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Israel doubled down and launched ground offensive inside Lebanon with stepped-up aerial attacks. Diplomatic efforts are already underway for a long-term peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon. But remember, Hezbollah can play spoiler since it has refused to engage in any negotiation with Israel.
Direct negotiations with the enemy are a grave error and a major fall from grace for the Lebanese authorities.
The Lebanese president, meanwhile, held a phone call with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He thanked Rubio for Washington's efforts to reach a ceasefire in Lebanon. But as per reports, the Lebanese president has refused to hold direct phone call with Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He, in fact, has said that a ceasefire with Lebanon is the natural starting point for talks with Israel. This is in contrast to what the U.S. President Donald Trump had earlier said. In a post on Truth Social, Trump had said this, what you see, I'll quote him here. We're trying to get a little breathing room between Israel and Lebanon. It has been a long time since the two leaders have spoken, like 34 years. It will happen tomorrow. Following this, Israel confirmed that Prime Minister Netanyahu will speak with the Lebanese President Josef Aoun as well. Earlier this week, remember, Lebanese and Israeli envoys met in Washington, D.C. The meeting was mediated by the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Earlier, the Israeli Prime Minister had outlined Israel's top priority in talks with Lebanon.
In the negotiations with Lebanon, there are two central objectives. First, the dismantling of Hezbollah. Second, a sustainable peace. Peace achieved through strength.
Remember, Lebanon was pulled into the war on the 2nd of March after Hezbollah attacked Israel. And since then, Israeli strikes have killed more than 2,000 people and displaced more than 1 million. More than 630 people have died and thousands have been injured in Lebanon since Donald Trump announced the 14-day ceasefire with Iran. The attacks have also killed UN peacekeepers as well as medical staff there. With the Trump administration and the mediator, Pakistan, talking up hopes, in fact, for further talks with Iran, hopes for an Iran-US deal are now high. But a ceasefire in Lebanon will help the prospects for a permanent end to this war. Israel's insistence on keep the attacks on Hezbollah sustained remain a red line for Iran and a massive hurdle for diplomacy. All right, let me introduce my guest on the show, Colonel David B. Des-Roses. She's a professor at the Thayer Marshall Institute and the former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He joins me live on WION. Colonel, good evening. Welcome to WION. The Lebanese president has said that he's not going to be directly talking with Prime Minister Netanyahu, while the U.S. president has said that there will be talks today. How do you see this at the moment? You know, there is still a stalemate that exists. There was some sort of optimism that started when the president had said that there will be some sort of talk tomorrow. But now there seems to be again a stalemate.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a stalemate. It's a peculiarity about the Lebanese system. So technically, Lebanese officials and citizens are not allowed to talk to anybody from Israel. That was a law passed, because Lebanese Hezbollah has representation in the Lebanese parliament. So they have to go about the fiction that they will be in the same room, they'll be discussing the same thing, but they won't have direct talks. It's a way of finessing a legislative framework that really is of another era. We kind of had a similar problem when I worked on peacekeeping. I was at a UN conference, and there were some countries that the United States was not allowed to speak to, recognize, or acknowledge. And unfortunately, we were at technical conference, and the guy who made the most sense was from one of those countries. And so whenever I addressed, I couldn't say the representative from X has said this. I would say somebody in the room said, and I think that's a good idea. So it's a similar kind of game.
Okay. So while we have that in context, and if we do assume that this is, the situation that they cannot accept, that there will be a direct phone call, the question comes to the biggest friction point, and it keeps on coming to that. That is the Hezbollah disarming itself. Hezbollah said we will not. Israel has said that is the biggest condition on which we will stop attacking Lebanon. Where do you see this heading today?
Yeah, Hezbollah is not going to arm itself. And honestly, the Israeli and the Lebanese government talking about Hezbollah is like two mice agreeing that the cat needs to wear a belt. Hezbollah is an agent of the Iranian state. Iran has made that clear in the Islamabad negotiations. They insisted that Hezbollah, which for 40 years Iran has insisted is just a product of Lebanon's domestic situation, that is an indigenous movement that they don't control. They insisted that that be included in bilateral U.S.-Iran talks. So what they basically said is, this is our organization, and we need to, we're willing to vest our national power and in order to preserve their interests. The Lebanese state has not shown the capacity or definitely and arguably the will to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah clearly will not disarm itself, because that would offend its Iranian masters, who are the people who ordered it into this war. I think the best we can hope for is a consensus on what needs to be done. And then I think the only people with both the desire and the capacity to do something about it ultimately will be Israel.
It's also interesting, Colonel, that Israel has always followed that dual approach when it comes to Lebanon. It keeps on talking with the Lebanese government, but at the same time, it keeps on striking Hezbollah as well. And that has been its approach for a long time. But today, when these talks are happening, there's also a lot of speculation, and since a long time at that Lebanon must join Abraham Accords. Do you see that as a logical conclusion of these talks if and when they happen?
No, I don't. I think that that's a step too far. And I think that honestly, Israel doesn't want to have a country coerced into joining the Abraham Accords. They want to have it like the United Arab Emirates, where they did it on their own accord. The Lebanese or the Israeli attitude towards Lebanon is somewhat paradoxical, and the United States shares this paradox, which is we want the Lebanese government to be sovereign entirely within Lebanon and to defend the borders of Lebanon, to not allow any foreign forces within Lebanon. And initially, when Israel invaded Lebanon for the first time, that was the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And later on, it was Hezbollah, which is more dangerous because it draws on, it's armed and controlled by Iran, but it draws on Lebanese citizens. But the deal is we want the Lebanese government to be sovereign and to defend its borders, not allow internal incursions, unless Israel decides to move in and do that. So,
Colonel, help me understand this. Where does the American role come into this? Because Donald Trump has been speaking about it. How do you see the Trump administration playing an important role? Because for Hezbollah, for many reasons, this is, their existential question if you'd ask them to disarm themselves.
Well, the question is whether you can accept having an organization within a state that functions as its own state, that has its own law, that is free to murder journalists who criticize it. If you recall the Beirut port blast, that was atomic bomb, that was basically fertilizer that was being stored by Hezbollah to produce explosives that to make. That was beyond the purview of the Lebanese state because of Hezbollah's coercive mechanism. Luqman Slim was a reporter who defied Hezbollah. He was murdered. And we've seen justice. Lebanese justice does not apply to Hezbollah. Hezbollah even murdered, this was prior to the war, they murdered an Irish peacekeeper, a member of UNIFIL, because he violated informal rules. There were villages that the UN was not allowed to go into. I mean, this is clearly an
so
organization.
do you think President Trump will be able to stop all of this?
No, I don't think he will. I think that what he will do, I think that the best outcome we could hope for would be an agreement between the Lebanese state. First off, Hezbollah has always tried to conflict attacks on it to attack us on the Lebanese state and the Lebanese people. So just putting the lie to that false distinction would be progress. And then I think if there is concurrence between Israel and the Lebanese state as to what the desired end state would be and what the role of Hezbollah would be, just an agreement that the goal of these two states is to have a disarmed Hezbollah that doesn't threaten its neighbors and doesn't threaten the Lebanese state, that would be significant progress, because then Hezbollah would find itself isolated.
All right, let's wait and see how today moves forward for both sides. Thanks very much, Colonel, for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.